Large three-row SUVs really are all the rage in the United States. In any other market, that wouldn't be the case, but here in America, bigger is always better. In fact, the American manufacturers such as GM, Ford, Chrysler with the Jeep Wagoneer practically own this market, and they've owned it for many years and decades. But there's one dark horse now from Japan that could most certainly change the game, and that is the 2025 Infiniti QX80. Now you're probably saying, wait a minute, Mike. The same Infiniti QX80 that last year was outdated, that was showing its age, this Infiniti QX80 is going to make a huge difference? Yeah, it actually is. From the outside, you have new looks, also a new suspension, and brand new technology that makes this SUV quite compelling at around $100,000. And in this video, we're going to go over everything about the QX80 that we have here today. We're going to check out the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, and see why maybe buying a Japanese three-row SUV might be a great decision. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Adam, who's the general manager of Infiniti of Norwood, for inviting me down here to check out the Infiniti QX80. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Infiniti inventory. So as always, let's begin with pricing. The model we have today is the Sensory, coming in at just over $100,500 and sitting beneath the top trim in the lineup for 2025, which is the Autograph. Now with the Autograph, you're spending close to $110,000 at a base cost, so you're saving about $10,000 right off the bat. However, with the Autograph, you are going to receive a lot of creature comforts and goodies that don't come equipped on our model today. However, there is one feature I know a lot of you are going to love if you do have families that is only available on the Sensory this high up in the trim levels that we'll go over once we check out the interior. What sets a tone for this new generation is the fact that you do have air suspension for all four corners, whereas last year you only had rear air suspension. So the demeanor of this vehicle on the roadways, its ride quality, ride comfort, and even ride height is going to really reflect this market now in 2024, heading into 2025, and should feel more upscale than some competitors right now on the market. Also, another thing too is that when you are approaching this vehicle with that lower ride height, you have easier access inside the QX80. Now, in regards to the overall dimensions of this vehicle, not much is different compared to last generation, surprisingly, despite the new looks. It's about an inch longer than last year, but they shortened the wheelbase very slightly. So if you own an older QX80 and you're hopping into this new model for the first time, there's no learning curve at all. It feels somewhat like that old QX80. The only reason why I say somewhat is because of the air suspension and of course the new engine under the hood, which that is going to change up the driving dynamics substantially for 2025. Now, in regards to the design of this vehicle, that's where I think a lot of you are going to be drawn in to what the QX80 is all about. Because if you remember, the last generation was a bit archaic and quite old. Whereas now, they've taken a lot of inspiration from the rest of the lineup, such as the QX60, but also going really deep into their heritage. So that new front grille is inspired by the bamboo forest of Japan, but I actually think it looks more like an old school design from cars from the 30s or maybe even the 20s with those large vents that go vertical up. That is a nice retro look that I can most certainly appreciate and love. You also have more of this piano accent for the daytime running light, and also that will be reflective for the rear lights as well, that I think really does go a long way, makes this vehicle look very upscale and posh that we definitely didn't have last year. Trendy but contemporary, Infiniti did separate the daytime running lights and the main headlights, much like we're seeing a lot in this market, or really in any crossover segment for 2024 heading into 2025. In typical Infiniti fashion, you still have the chrome accents that outline the front grille. They're not going to move away from that at all, but also in this market, the chrome accents definitely add a sense of elegance to this model. You're also going to notice the color contrasting accents for the lower portion of the front bumper, and better yet, you have active side air curtains for improved aerodynamics. Quickly taking a look at the side profile, you are going to have 22-inch alloy wheels, and typically for a vehicle in this market that is body on frame, larger tires and larger wheels does play around with ride quality. However, because you have active air suspension, going over the bumps and imperfections, you're really not going to feel them at all, and this will really not showcase the fact that it is related to a pickup truck. So I know a lot of you are going to appreciate that, but also as a family hauler, it's going to be very conducive for a younger family, or if you're just looking for a nice vehicle that you can drive into town or go on those longer road trips, it's actually a very pleasant driving experience. You're also going to have power folding side mirrors with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Also, of course, just like we saw up front, the chrome accents once again continue on this vehicle. A nice trendy look, but also typical look for Infiniti. Then as you make your way around to the back, the main highlight here for the Infiniti QX80 is the piano key taillights. And this just looks really high quality and most certainly draws your attention. Now, in regards to the body lines, just the way this vehicle is styled, I wouldn't say it's drastically different than the prior generation. All they really did was really refresh this model to make it look more modernized, more sleek. And you see that with the body lines as well. It definitely looks more cutting edge and aerodynamic than it did in the past, rather than being just a block or a large SUV that's typically found in this segment. Under the hood for the QX80, and this is standard across all trims for 2025, is a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 engine producing 450 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque, and it is paired with a 9-speed automatic transmission. That is right, the V8 is no more with the QX80, but I don't think you'll be missing it at all with this new powertrain, but we'll find out later on in this video once we take this vehicle out for a test drive. Now, one thing that I do want to point out here with the Sensory is that 4-wheel drive does come standard, whereas rear-wheel drive is available on the lower trims. So once you get to the Sensory and Autograph, it's only 4-wheel drive from there on out. Now, another metric you might find relevant, especially if you do go camping during the summer or you tow a small boat, is that towing capacity comes in at 8,500 pounds. That is class leading when you're looking at standard towing capacity. Now, you're going to find better from V8s in this class, but at around $82,000 for a base price for the QX80, that's not too bad, especially if you're looking for a capable 3-row SUV. Also, when it pertains to fuel economy, you're looking at right around 15 miles per gallon in the city and 19 miles per gallon on the highway. That's a marginal increase from last generation, but I think a lot of you are going to appreciate that for sure with this smaller powertrain. So stepping inside the QX80, you are greeted by a space-age cabin. I mean, 2 years ago, I featured the last generation, and we went from the Stone Age to the Space Age in one giant leap. And it's not just the design, the outward appearance, or even the interior comfort. It's the technology. In a segment that includes the Cadillac Escalade, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, maybe you want to throw in the BMW X7 and Mercedes-Benz GLS, Infiniti has to go all in with the technology. And really for Nissan and Infiniti in general, technology is a bit of a weak point. In regards to interior comfort and refinement, that has always been a strong suit for Infiniti, and there is nothing different here for this generation, and especially for the Sensory trim that we have here today. So let's first start off with the comfort, because I have a few comments I want to make about the technology that actually I think is going to go a long way for this model moving forward in this segment, but also I see a lot of similarities to rivals, which is not a bad thing at all. So with these seats, you have power adjustable, heated, ventilated, and massaging semi-aniline leather seats that I have to say are super comfortable. You don't have to go with the Autograph to receive the creature comforts. However, not going with the Autograph, the second row misses out on those massaging seats, but that's a minor sacrifice in my opinion. And also, who cares about the people in the back? It's all about you as the driver and maybe your front passenger. These seats provide a lot of comfort, also a decent amount of support. Bolstering obviously isn't going to be too aggressive. This isn't a sports crossover or SUV by any means at all. But this does set the tone for the entire interior in general. So we also have the 24-speaker Klipsch audio system with speakers in the headrest. And on my way to this location to film the QX80, I was blasting some 80s music and it sounded really good. And actually, on a longer drive, it would be a very pleasant experience. In front of you is a leather-wrapped steering wheel, which feels really premium in the hands. You have paddle shifters as well. Most likely you won't be engaging them with this 9-speed automatic transmission, since the QX80 Sensory isn't a sporty SUV. However, if you do want to rotate the gears yourself, you can do that. What I also love too is that this steering wheel does have a more of a flat bottom design, and that kind of carries over the top portion as well. You have very aggressive 10 and 2 positions, but also firm 9 and 3 grips as well. And just the way it feels in the hands, very nice, very premium for a vehicle from Infiniti, but for an SUV at around $100,000. You're also going to find the buttons on your steering wheel that control the full digital gauge cluster in front of you, but also the infotainment system as well. So you can switch with just a press of a button, and that way you don't have to reach for the screen if you don't want to, and you want to keep your hands on the steering wheel. Now, talking about this digital gauge cluster, this is great stuff. Now, we have seen Nissan and Infiniti move in this direction, but just not to this extent. So you are going to have Google Maps integrated into this user interface, also, of course, the gauge cluster as well, and you can showcase that in the center of your gauges. With the gauges, they are more traditional, looking more analog, but still in digital form, so I know a lot of you are going to appreciate that. You can fully customize this screen to your liking by using the little dial on the right side of the steering wheel, but also the directional buttons that surround this little wheel. And you can scroll through your safety systems. You can also access vehicle settings from this screen as well, such as your driver assistance, your head-up display, your eco mode settings, your tire pressure monitoring system, your clock, vehicle settings, towing settings, maintenance, everything from this screen. So really cool to see. Then taking a look at the infotainment system and just this conjoined screen in general, this kind of reminds me of what we have in Mercedes-Benz products. I see a lot of inspiration from European manufacturers, and even though Cadillac also has this unified screen, this is more traditional to what you're going to find in Euro competitors, and I definitely like that for sure, where this is a nice upgrade over what Infiniti has been putting out over the last few years, but this is also one giant leap from the analog gauges that we had last generation, or the last QX80 I had featured on this channel. And as I mentioned before, with this infotainment system, you do have Google integration built in, so Google Maps, Google Assistant, on top of the fact you do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility. There are some embedded features that I do like on this screen that I think does go a long way. One being the dash cam. So you can record an event, you can also take photos. Now, there are some other optional features you can go with. You can even take a selfie with your interior cameras, and that would be pretty cool if you have some friends tagging along with you. But maybe you are on a drive, maybe you are just in a situation that you're not quite sure with the person in front of you or person behind you. You have this dash cam for the front and rear cameras, which I think is really cool to have. The other feature that I find somewhat cutting edge also pertains to the camera system. So you can go with a full 180-degree view that includes your digital gauge cluster and the infotainment system. And with the QX80, because it has this long hood and you're sitting pretty high up, maybe you can't see what's in front of you when you're parking this vehicle in a tight spot, or maybe you're in the pickup and drop-off line at your child's school and you want to make sure you're not running people over. You have this visibility, and that is something I can definitely appreciate. Also, with this head unit, you will find quick access icons at the bottom of the screen to quickly get you to your navigation map, your music, your Bluetooth, your home screen, your Google Assistant, and then of course your vehicle settings as well. And again, I find this to be very user-friendly, just hopping into this vehicle for the first time and interacting with the technology just within 20 minutes of getting the keys to this QX80. And taking a look at the center console, you have another screen that controls everything from your fan speed, fan direction, your 3-zone climate control, your heated steering wheel, and heated and ventilated front seats. You can also access your different drive modes from Eco, Sport, Tow, and Snow. And I find this layout, again, to be rather easy and straightforward. And as I mentioned, with the full digital gauge cluster and infotainment system, the screen does remind me of some European rivals, such as Audi with the Q8 or higher trims and models in the lineup, where the secondary screen has similar functions and a similar layout. But also, just the way the screen is slanted kind of reminds me of what we see in Mercedes-Benz products such as the C-Class and GLC. But this is a nice add-on to the QX80's interior, and I think this would most likely be the screen you'll be interacting with the most just on a day-to-day basis when you are adjusting your climate control settings. For the rest of the center console, you will find a cubby for your smartphone with a wireless phone charging pad, 2 USB-C inputs. Next to that will be 2 cup holders, obviously. Then for the standard storage compartment, you have plenty of room for smaller items such as a couple gadgets, most certainly tons of smartphones, a couple wallets. On our model, we also have a digital rear view mirror, and that is going to be key if you do have people in the second and third row. You have a nice clear view behind you, and that's perfect for a vehicle of this size. Then to round out the front seating area, you do have a panoramic moonroof, which will bring in a lot of natural light to the interior. Typically, a pano roof would make the interior seem a lot bigger than it is in reality, but this is a QX80. The interior is large regardless. Then moving on to the second row, as you can tell, we have bench seats. And this is important because if you do have a family, you have a large family, you're going to want to go with the Sensory over the Autograph, because with the Sensory, you can opt for 8 seats rather than 7, whereas the Autograph, the captain chairs do come standard. Now with the Autograph, those captain chairs are heated, ventilated, and massaging, whereas for our model today, the outboard seats are only heated and ventilated. I know, one minor inconvenience for people in the back, but I don't think they'll be complaining at all. Now, as I mentioned before, you do have climate control back here as well. So passengers in the second row are going to be cool or warm depending on the time of year. Also with the QX80, with the Sensory, with the leather trimmed upholstery seats, they're very comfortable. You have a decent amount of support as well, and you can recline, so you can really relax in the second row of this vehicle. Also, even though with the bench seats, they don't have the power adjustability, you can slide them forwards and backwards, giving your passengers more leg room, but also helping out the people in the third row as well, so that way they're not cramped or claustrophobic. But in regards to legroom, shoulder room, and headroom, there's so much of it, no one is feeling claustrophobic in this vehicle. It's also from the center console where you can adjust the fan direction as well. So people in the back are going to receive the same amenities or similar amenities to those up front. You're going to find two USB-C inputs, a 12-volt outlet, and rounding out the second row seating area, you do get a center armrest with two cup holders. Then finally taking a look at the third row for passengers way back here in the bleachers. It's not too bad back here. I mean, these seats provide a decent amount of support to the back. Yes, I mean, I think people around the height of 6 feet tall are going to be cramped back here, especially since you do have the bench seats in front of you on the Sensory. But headroom isn't too bad. Also, shoulder room, more than adequate. I think you could try squeezing in a third person. Now, most likely you could have 3 kids sit back here in the third row. So very practical stuff here. Also, the leather upholstery again gives you a nice, comfortable experience. Now, on both sides of this third row, you do have switches here where you can adjust the backs of these seats. You can move them forward, you can also move them backwards. So that way you can just sit back and recline on a longer drive. Pretty impressive here. Now, this is one of the reasons why you want to go with the QX80 over the QX60 or any other mid-size crossover with a third row. The size difference is most certainly noticeable. And the fact that I don't feel cramped or claustrophobic, even though I'm not the tallest person out there, that goes a long way. On both sides of the third row, you are going to find a USB-C input and also 2 cup holders. Then making our way around to the back to check out the rear cargo area. As always, and very expected for a $100,000 SUV, you are going to receive a power liftgate. And inside, behind the third row seats, you're looking at right around 22 cubic feet of room, which is fantastic for a 3-row SUV. Now, keep in mind, last generation only had 16 cubic feet. So to increase the cargo area by 6 cubic feet, that's pretty impressive. Infiniti has made this a usable space. Today, I brought more camera gear than I probably needed, so I have 3 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod. And I still had more room to store other items as well. So I think if you are going on a road trip with the family, you could probably fit 4, 5, possibly 6 bags of luggage back here, depending on the size of those bags. Then on the right side of the rear cargo area will be your switches that will lower and raise the rear suspension. So if you have heavier items that you're putting in your QX80, you don't have to worry about scratching the rear bumper. On top of that, you will find the switches that will conveniently lower and raise the second and third row. Now, with the second row seats folded, you are looking at right around 59 cubic feet of room. And if you're just using this vehicle as a 2-row SUV, that's practical. That is very good to see. Also, of course, these seats do fold flat, so you'll have plenty of storage back here for any items you'll be carrying. And then finally, with the third row seats folded, you're looking at right around 101 cubic feet, which does fall right in line with all of its closest rivals. So in regards to practicality, and as we've already experienced in regards to comfort, this is most certainly in line with all of its closest rivals. And now that we've gone over everything, let's take the QX80 out for a quick test drive to see how it performs. So I have come to the Blue Hills today to fully experience the QX80, to see what it's all about. I've heard some rave reviews about the handling, maneuverability, and cornering ability, but also with this air suspension and chassis, this seems to be a great daily driver, but also family hauler, but also could be blurring the lines a bit. Considering that we no longer have the V8, you would think, all right, so it's not going to feel rugged like a true body-on-frame SUV, and it might not be fun to drive. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. What Infiniti has done to this chassis and suspension is phenomenal. And in the first 20 minutes of being behind the wheel, my first impressions would be that its maneuverability is unnatural. I'm heading into these corners at around 40 miles an hour, And it feels like a BMW X7. It feels like a vehicle that's about 10 inches shorter than what we have here with the QX80. It is so much fun to drive. It handles like a sports crossover, and that is playing around with my perception today. I have to remember that this vehicle is 211 inches in length, very wide, and also is body on frame. It doesn't ride like a pickup truck. It doesn't feel anything like a Cadillac Escalade or a GMC Yukon. And because of that, this has become one of the most engaging test drives I've ever done in this segment. Because I'm not a huge fan of pickup trucks at all. I do like sports crossovers. I do like what they're offering, especially from Europe. And it seems as though that Infiniti has incorporated that into this vehicle's driving dynamics. Infiniti claims that they are coming out with a sport version of the QX80, and so far I believe them. In fact, I don't think it's even necessary to wait. Go with a Sensory or go with an Autograph, and you pretty much have that. I mean, 450 horsepower is nothing to laugh at. It's nothing to downplay. You have tons of torque, especially when you are rolling. And for an SUV that typically and stereotypically would be for a larger family, for longer road trips, maybe even for some livery services, this is polar opposite of that. And last generation, Infiniti did mask the QX80's body-on-frame chassis. But this generation takes it to a whole different level. And I think a lot of it comes down to the air suspension. I feel so planted to the roadways, especially in sport mode, but also they retuned the steering. You have a nice weighted steering that does feel rather heavy. Some people might say it's a bit too heavy for this segment. I disagree. It's not vague, it's not numb. In fact, it feels very dynamic. You feel very tuned into the driving experience. And because of that, its turning radius, its handling, the steering input makes it feel like it's a much smaller SUV on the roads. And you forget that. Heading into these corners at around 45 miles an hour isn't a problem. There's no body roll here. And that just feels uncanny, to say the least. Also, I love the sound of this twin-turbo V6. Has a very nice character to it. But it doesn't drone. It's not too audible when you are on throttle. Now, since I am behind a slower driver here, let's change the drive mode to standard. And let's just cruise for a bit. Now, I will say, on roads that are not freshly paved, you definitely get some of that pickup truck effect, where you are going to be thrown around a bit. But on a road like this, with the twists and bends, it's smooth. Too smooth, in fact. And that is heightened by the leather upholstery for these seats that, again, keep you in place. The bolstering is nice. And also, of course, with the air suspension. You can also get up to speed very quickly when merging into lanes or passing slower drivers. It's beyond capable and beyond competent. And I would say in a completely different way, obviously not a competitor, nowhere close in regards to pricing, this kind of reminds me of the Mazda CX-90. The CX-90 is built on a platform that doesn't have a sports tuned suspension. You don't get all the bells and whistles with that vehicle, and yet it kind of feels like a poor man's BMW X7. The Infiniti QX80 feels like a BMW X7, but is larger, more practical, and you get all the amenities on top of that. Well, everyone is going to focus on the technology that you have here on the dashboard for the digital gauge cluster and infotainment system. It's the driving experience. It's the driving dynamics that, to me, is leaving a lasting impression. While last generation, the suspension did give you the sense that you were gliding over the roadways, it felt like a cloud. This time, I feel a sense of connection. And even though you do have a lack of a lower center of gravity per se, I mean, remember, this is a very heavy SUV. The sense of connectivity and the feeling of being connected to the overall driving experience and what this SUV is providing is really adding to the sensation that the QX80 is more than just being a straight-on luxury vehicle, an SUV, that it is something more. And with the Cadillac Escalade, that is a polar opposite experience, especially with the V8. You feel like you're driving a Chevrolet Silverado, just a more luxurious Silverado. The Infiniti QX80 doesn't feel like a Nissan Titan. And dare I say that for Infiniti and for a Nissan product, this is rather impressive. Now, other elements in regards to the driving experience, such as your overall vision, your shoulder room, also, of course, your seat positioning, everything does feel like a pickup, which again is why my whole perception is kind of messed up here with the QX80 on this test drive. But you have a nice panoramic view. A-pillars are somewhat thick. That's to be expected, so you might have blind spots when you are approaching intersections or red lights. And then taking a look at your side mirrors, they are massive. You can see what's in your blind spots and see what's in the lane next to you. And then, as I mentioned before, when we checked out the interior, you do have a digital rear view camera, so that way you can see what's directly behind you without having to worry about people getting in your way when they are sitting in the second and third row. Seat positioning wise, you do sit pretty high up in this SUV, but I will say though, the seat positioning does resemble more of a crossover than a body-on-frame SUV. While I wouldn't go as far to say that the Infiniti QX80 is the new benchmark in this segment, it most certainly gives the Cadillac Escalade a run for its money, even without the V8. As we're now on the highway, traveling at highway speeds, road noise isn't too bad at all, even for a vehicle that is squared off, that isn't aerodynamic. This is all around impressive in many ways. You can easily pass slower drivers. And this SUV can get out of its own way. All in all, this is a very exciting SUV. But even more than that, it's a body-on-frame 3-row. And the fact that I'm having a blast behind the wheel of a vehicle like this, that's saying quite a lot. And while I don't think this is the benchmark, it could most certainly redefine what a body-on-frame SUV is in the 2020s. So in closing, after spending a few hours with the 2025 Infiniti QX80, this is a game changer, not only within its segment, but within the lineup as well. I want to see a lot more of this from Infiniti because they have proven and have showcased that they can actually do this. I want to see this in the QX60 and QX50. It would really revitalize the brand in the United States. But when you're comparing this to a Cadillac Escalade, a Lincoln Navigator, this can now hold its own, not only in regards to performance, but also technology and interior quality. Infiniti has always been great at giving you a comfortable cabin, but the technology has always been that missing link. They have now fixed that. They've addressed that. And with the full digital gauge cluster, the infotainment system, the center stack, this is now on par with Cadillac, with GM, with the Jeep Wagoneer. And I think that when you take a look at what this vehicle is offering, even though we don't have the V8 anymore, you have an SUV that feels very substantial on the roadways. It's fun to drive with the air suspension. Also, this twin-turbo V6 is pretty smooth. And I think when you combine everything together, whether it is the technology or the performance, or of course this new suspension, you have an SUV that is most certainly formidable at around $100,000, but really compelling for a lot of buyers who are looking for a grand vehicle and grand experience at this price point. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys next time.